Welcome to Murdock's Music Minute. It's another fresh review. There's a little bit of rain outside, and that's the perfect weather or backdrop to be talking about this new album by none other than Britpop veterans Blur. Yes, rather unexpectedly, quite surprisingly, Blur have released a new album a couple of weeks ago. It's called The Ballad of Darren. And according to the band, this more or less came into being rather accidentally. Damon Albarn had a couple of demo versions and unfinished songs lying around and suddenly ended up with a ton of songs possibly suitable for a new Blur album, and the band felt it was the right time and the right material, so they got together and recorded this latest album. With the title The Ballad of Darren, one is up to speculations what this album might sound like. The word ballad, of course, evokes ballads. No surprise. Maybe something epic, or maybe even a concept album. Darren, by the way, is, according to interviews with the band, a former bodyguard of Blur, who has more or less become an important friend along the way. And he was a great fan of the unfinished song The Ballad, and always supported the idea of Damon Albarn finishing the song and recording it. And that's what Blur did next to 9 other tracks on this album. So they more or less dedicated the album to Darren. But Darren also here stands for a various number of persons. On the album cover, we see somebody in a pool. It's bright blue, but if you look more carefully in the background, you see heavy clouds, probably announcing a heavy storm or at least bad weather. This photograph was taken somewhere in the Highlands in Scotland. And at the same time, this guy in the pool, for me, also seems to be a little bit of an echo to the more flamboyant, summery album cover of Blur's great Britpop album, The Great Escape. Only that here we have something foreboding in the background, something more melancholic. And this is not somebody jumping from a boat into the sea, probably a millionaire with champagne having a party at his yacht. This is somebody who needs to swim for physical rehabilitation. Quite obviously, the Brit party years are over for Blur, but let's find out what the band really has in store for us 8 years after the last studio. The cover photograph by documentary photographer Martin Parr, as mentioned, shows a swimmer in an outdoor pool in Scotland, and this photograph already transports a feeling of loneliness or something cold and foreboding. And the opening track, The Ballad, itself, not surprisingly, also has this feeling of melancholia, a certain longing, and a feeling of loss and loneliness. It is a slow opener that sets the tone for the entire album, because The Ballad of Darren indeed is quite filled with mid-tempo to slow tracks and, well, ballads indeed. The ballad starts very sparsely with only a bit of piano and a programmed beat. This is very much reminiscent of the Think Tank album by Blur, or maybe even more so of Damon Albarn's solo work. But then Strings enter the arrangement, harmony vocals, and a very reveling tune by Blur. This presents a more aged, more mature, less anthemic version of Blur's great pop ballads from the 1990s. Think This Is a Low, but most of all, The Universal.
Oh, can't you see, when the ballad comes for you, it comes like me. Well, I know, can't change the times.
Track 2 is almost the complete opposite. It's called St. Charles Square. Was also released as a single. Enter the weird and brash guitar of Graham Coxon, a more tempo track, quite rocking, slightly weird, almost jarring in places. Again, though, this is a mature version of Blur's mid-90s Britpop sound. You can still trace a little bit of the punk energy of their early years. The lyrics deal with anxiety, fears, and failures. And to me, this track is a little bit of a return to their roots. The band sounds very content on this one.
Call me out, but call me, 'cause there's something down here and it's living under the floorboards. It's grabbed me round the neck with its long and slender claws.
And they continue to do so on the next track, Barbaric. This is the most up-tempo track of the album, also maybe the most pop-sounding tune. Despite the lyrics about the breakup or the failure of a relationship, Blur really haven't sounded that poppy and happy since the days of The Great Escape.
We have lost the feeling that we thought we'd never lose. Where are we going? We have lost the feeling that we thought we'd never lose. And it is barbaric.
Russian Strings is another very melodious ballad. I can hear almost a bit of a soul influence on this one, or 1980s sophisti-pop. Graham Coxon plays a gorgeous little hook on the guitar. It's very melancholic and at the same time, as I mentioned, a quite lush and beautiful song. It's about loss, regret, or the feeling of longing. The Everglades, track number 5, is an acoustic track, again very slow, but with soft electronic beats, and this combination again sounds more like a mellow moment on a Gorillaz album, or even more like a Damon Albarn solo track. But then the strings return, providing a dreamy end of the album's first half. This is another song that sounds very melancholic. It's about loss, about possibilities that are no longer available, chances one didn't take. So this is sort of a red thread that is present throughout the whole album, more or less. The Narcissist seamlessly follows after the Everglades. This was the first single released before the album's release. It's a solid but still a bit odd choice for a single. However, in the context of the whole album, I have to say this is a great song. It's actually catchier than you might think if you first hear it, or if you've heard it as a standalone single. Maybe you were even a little bit underwhelmed by it. This is a great mid-tempo track by Blur. It's catchy in a quirky way, with its background vocals repeating the end of each line and a mildly energetic chorus.
Connect us to love and keep us peaceful for a while. I'm a shining light in your eye. You probably shine it back on me, but I won't fall this time.
Next up is a song called Goodbye Albert. It's yet another mid-tempo track. This time there's something more synthy going on in the background. Graham Coxon adds some droll guitar effects. But overall, this is a dreamy, tranquil song. I could imagine Jarvis Cocker singing this too. We're already at track number 8. This is called Faraway Island. The album, however, becomes more and more sleepy and tranquil at this point. We get retro synths and longing vocals from Damon in this reverb-heavy dream pop waltz. And if that was not enough for you, we get yet another ballad. It's called Avalon. It's a very nostalgic, melancholic song. But this time there's a little bit more guitar to the song. Most importantly, though, it has a brass section. This song, for me, has a faint echo of the Britpop era Blur, especially in the bridge. That has a classic Modern Life is Rubbish or Park Life sound, but slowed down considerably. The song seems to be about getting older, losing one's dreams, contemplating the past, or contemplating an ideal state that maybe never was and will never be. Again, it's a very laconic and melancholic tune. And then the album ends with The Heights. This sounds like an unobtrusive guitar ballad at first, but then has some unexpectedly strong and cool drumming from Dave Rowntree. I really like the beat to this track. Lyrically, once more, a rather sad song. I guess also about the end of a friendship or the end of a relationship. Again, there's a feeling of loss that permeates the lyrics. This one, too, after repeated listens, turns out to have a rather good and memorable melody. It ends, however, with increasing guitar noise, complete cacophonia in the end, and a cut-off ending, which maybe is not a very pleasant ending to the album and seems to be a bit out of step with the rest of the material here, but I think this is a welcome, edgy touch to this album.
Are we running out of time? Something so momentary that you can even feel it.
The album is rather short. The 10 tracks pass by rather quickly. And if you don't listen carefully, this album, at least during the first few spins, might give you the impression that it is not very memorable, or that it is very unobtrusive, actually. But it boasts some beautiful tunes, actually, and I think this really is a grower album. You have to listen to it several times for the tunes to really show their distinct character. It's definitely a sound that should make Blur fans very happy if you are up for a more matured and slower version of Blur. Despite this feeling of melancholia and all the ballads, I think this is the most pop-oriented album Blur has released since the mid-90s. It maybe could have even done with one or two more tracks to sort of round it off a little bit more, and I definitely would have liked to hear more from Graham Coxon, not only on guitar, but maybe even also as a vocalist on one or two tracks. In fact, there is a song called Sticks and Stones from these sessions, which is a great track sung by Graham Coxon. But for some reason, it was left off the album, or maybe they saved it for as a B-side or for a deluxe edition. I don't know. It would have been one of the more up-tempo, upbeat numbers on this album, and I think it would have made for great dynamics if they had included this on the regular album. Also, Alex James, the bass player, is always competently present, but very much in the background. I also would have preferred to have at least one or two really good bass moments here. The bass is really not what this album is about. But those wishes aside, the Ballad of Darren is an easy and a solid 7.5 out of 10 for me. Maybe getting close to an 8 out of 10. As I've mentioned, I think you have to give this album several listens to fully appreciate it. Possibly even better than The Magic Whip, which I also quite enjoyed. So those two, late career albums, while not maybe the most essential Blur albums you can find, are both definitely very pleasant and very nice additions to the Blur catalog. And this one is a really, really strong and nice return. I hope they don't let us wait another 8 years for another Blur album. I think these guys, they are now all in their, I think, early 50s. They still have a lot of good tunes in them, and maybe one day will surprise us with another really, really good album. We will see. But that's it from me about the Ballad of Darren. Probably an album that will speak more to people my age or older, so 40 plus, 50 plus, with all those nostalgia and all those themes of loss and thinking about maybe the more the sadder aspects of life. But yeah, give it a spin. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned for more Murdock Music Minutes.